kids at the center see me as a cheerful grandma. They gather around, learning to brew coffee, drafting plans for their dreams. One once asked, "Miss Lucinda, why do you love teaching us so much?" I smiled. "Because I want you to know no one can dictate your future. But you." My answer made them laugh. But I knew, somewhere, the seeds I planted would grow. News from Bend reaches me occasionally. An old friend said Nathan now lives modestly, working at a small tech firm. No fancy cars, no big house, but he's learning to value simple things. They say he lives quietly, avoiding the spotlight. Hearing this, my heart tightened. I hadn't fully forgiven, but I felt relief. At least my son had chosen to stand on his own, free from another's manipulation. As for Cassandra, she vanished from Bend like a shadow. No one knows exactly where she went or what she's doing. Some say she fled to another state, starting over with a new name. Others say she's entangled in lawsuits, unable to recover. I no longer care. Cassandra destroyed herself with her ambition and deceit. To me, she's no longer a name worth troubling over. In my small apartment, I keep a wooden box with a few remaining keepsakes. One late autumn afternoon, as golden leaves blanketed the paths, I opened it. Inside was the old sign, Lucinda's Café, that I'd taken down the day I left Bend. The white paint on the wood had faded, but I could still read it clearly. I traced my fingers over its rough surface, emotions welling up. Below the familiar words, I'd carved a sentence with trembling but resolute hands on my final day at the café. "Freedom and dignity can never be forged." I smiled, tears welling. It wasn't just a reminder for myself, but a vow. Assets could be stolen, signatures forged, family betrayed, but dignity, the thing I reclaimed after years of bowing my head, no one could touch. I placed the sign back in the box, closed the lid, and felt light, as if closing an old book. Outside, the setting sun cast gold over the rooftops, children's laughter echoing from the nearby community center. I whispered, to myself, to Robert, to Nathan somewhere out there. At last, I found freedom, and it was true. After all the storms, I was no longer the woman trembling before another's ambition. I was Lucinda, a woman who had lost, had hurt, but had risen to reclaim her dignity. And I knew for the rest of my life, I would live fully, peacefully, without fear or regret. If you resonate with Lucinda's journey to reclaim her freedom and dignity, please subscribe to join me in following more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video with more surprising life experiences. One afternoon, after a class at the community center, I sat chatting with a few elderly friends. We talked about life, children, loss, and renewal. A silver-haired woman, Alfreda, smiled sadly and said, "People can take your money, your home, even your memories, but there's one thing they can never take, if you don't let them, your dignity." Her words silenced me. I remembered the nights in the dark cafe, clutching the humiliation of Cassandra's blunt claim that I'd soon die and leave everything to them. I recalled the forged contract, Nathan's downcast eyes, her cold laughter. All of it once made me think I had nothing left, but I still had one thing, the most important thing. That night, I wrote in the notebook I always carried, "Assets can be forged, but dignity cannot." And I had chosen to keep my dignity, even if it meant letting go of the cafe I loved my whole life. A few days later, an envelope appeared on my doorstep. The mail carrier said it came from Bend. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was Nathan's familiar handwriting. "Mom, I've divorced Cassandra. I know these words can't erase everything, but I want to start over. I caused you so much pain and betrayed your trust with my cowardly silence. Now, I want to make it right. I have no excuses. Only one wish, to hear you call me your son again. Please give me a chance." I read, each word piercing my heart. Tears streamed down my cheeks. This was the letter I'd longed for, hoped for every night before sleep. But when it arrived, I couldn't simply grasp it. I sat for hours at my small wooden table. The letter spread before me. My trembling hand rested on the paper, as if feeling for my son's warmth. Part of me yearned to rush back to Bend, to hug him and say I'd forgiven him, but another part was still wounded, still remembered the nights he sat silent, letting Cassandra trample me. Those scars didn't vanish with one letter. I gave a tearful smile. I knew forgiveness couldn't be rushed. It needed time, and first, Nathan had to face himself. I couldn't ignore the truth that he chose silence when I needed him most, but I also couldn't deny this letter took more courage than the Nathan of months before. I folded the letter carefully, placing it in my desk drawer. I didn't reply right away. Maybe one day I'd write him a few lines. Tomorrow, or a year from now. I didn't know, but for now I needed this quiet space for myself. That evening, I stepped onto the small porch of my apartment. The night sky glittered with stars like shards of glass. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my chest. In that moment, I heard Robert's voice in my memory. Lucinda, live for yourself, not just to please others. I smiled through tears. Yes, I'd spent my life sacrificing for others, keeping a home, a cafe, an image of a perfect family. But in the end, I realized the only thing worth fighting for, worth keeping, was myself. I didn't know what the future held with Nathan. I didn't know if I could fully forgive, but I knew I'd learn to live alone without loneliness, to love myself without needing anyone's permission. Back at the table, I opened my notebook, adding a line below the previous one. Freedom isn't the absence of bonds. Freedom is daring to let go of bonds that strip your dignity. Then I closed the notebook, placing it beside Nathan's letter. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, and when dawn broke, I knew I'd truly found the most precious thing, freedom in my own soul. Years have passed since I left Bend. Time, like a quiet stream, has washed away some of the wounds in my heart, leaving a calmer, more serene surface. In this small town, I've built a simple life: early morning walks around the lake, midday teaching kids at the community center, afternoons sipping tea with new friends, and evenings reading in my cozy sunlit apartment. I didn't respond, just stood and stepped away from the counter. I no longer had the strength to embrace him, as I once did, nor could I offer easy forgiveness. But I let him stay in the cafe, alone with his regret. Outside, the sunset glowed red, casting light through the cafe's glass windows. Another evening passed, and I knew there was still a long distance between Nathan and me. But at least today, he had spoken, and I, though still cold, left a crack open for one thing. Hope that one day I might trust my son again. After that tearful conversation with Nathan, I sat in the cafe for a long time, looking at the familiar wooden tables, the walls I'd painted myself, the lamps Robert and I had chosen years ago. I knew, no matter how much I loved this place, my heart was no longer at peace here. The cafe, this house, they were stained with betrayal, with painful memories that would always cling to me. I needed a fresh start, and this time, I would choose it not for anyone else, but for myself. A few weeks later, I decided to sell the cafe. The news spread quickly through Bend. Many came to me, surprised, regretful, asking Lucinda, "Are you sure this is your soul?" I just smiled. My soul isn't in these four walls. It's here. I placed my hand on my chest. And for the first time in years, I said those words without choking up. The sale went smoothly, thanks to Harper's help. The buyers, a young couple, vowed to keep the name Lucinda's Café as a tribute. On the last day, I stood at the door, watching them clean and rearrange, and instead of sadness, I felt relief. Perhaps this place would have a new chapter, while I moved on to another. I moved to a smaller town, about 100 miles from Bend, where I'd once taught a workshop. There was a warm community center, filled with kind elderly friends and eager teenagers. On my first day there, I heard bright laughter, a piano playing from the rehearsal room, and the faint smell of cookies from the kitchen. The space was so different from the tension that had suffocated the cafe in its final months. It was full of life. I signed up as a volunteer, teaching soft skills and sharing small business experience. Standing before those kids, telling my story, I realized my voice no longer trembled with pain. I spoke of my losses, the betrayal from family, but not to mourn, instead to deliver a message. Sometimes to keep your dignity, you have to dare to let go, and freedom, though it may come late, is still in time to live fully. Days passed, and I found a new rhythm. Mornings, I walked the quiet streets, breathing fresh air. Midday, I went to the center, chatting with peers about life stories. Afternoons, I sat in the library, reading, sometimes writing my memories. Evenings, I felt peace in my cozy apartment, free from worries about who might demand money or forge my signature. Once, while mixing dough with kids in the center's kitchen, I burst out laughing. A boy asked, "Why are you so happy, ma'am?" I replied, "Because I realized freedom tastes sweeter than any cake." The kids roared with laughter. I felt my heart lighter than it had ever been, as if it bore no scars. Still, sometimes, seeing a young man with a kind smile like Nathan's once was, my heart would twinge. The distance between us hadn't vanished, but I no longer let that pain define my life. I chose to move forward, to find peace instead of dwelling. One evening, standing at my new apartment's window, watching the sun paint the distant mountains red, I whispered, "Robert, do you see? I did it. I left, not because I lost, but because I chose to win myself." And it was true. I had changed my life. I was no longer the woman crying in a dark cafe, trembling before my daughter-in-law's threats. I was Lucinda, a woman who learned to let go to reclaim her freedom. And that freedom, to me, was true life. Days in the new town flowed gently like a calm stream. Each morning, I sat by my apartment's window, holding a hot cup of coffee, quietly watching the sun rise over distant mountains. The simple scenery, nothing grand, filled my heart with a feeling I hadn't known in years. Freedom. No more fear of someone demanding money. No more panic over tampered documents. No more feeling like a ghost in my own family. I stood, speaking slowly, my voice calm but like a verdict. "Cassandra, you chose this path, and now you've destroyed it yourself." She screamed one last time, her shrill cry echoing, "No, this was supposed to be mine. Mine and Nathan's." Then those blazing eyes dimmed, leaving behind an endless void. In my heart, there was no longer fear. Only one truth stood clear. Cassandra had lost, not because of me, but because of her own greed and foolish words. I left the meeting room that day with heavy steps. Cassandra's final scream still echoed in the room, and the image of Nathan, head bowed in despair, clung to my mind. I knew the truth had been exposed, that Cassandra had destroyed herself, but there was no joy in me. I had won, yes, but it was a tear-soaked victory, for amidst those bitter confessions, I saw clearly I had lost my son long ago from the day he chose silence over standing by his mother. 2 days later, as I sat in the cafe sorting through the chaotic pile of documents Harper told me to keep safe, the door swung open. Nathan stood there, his face gaunt, eyes sunken, as if he had aged a decade overnight. He stepped inside hesitantly, his voice hoarse. "Mom." I looked up, my hand pausing on the papers. Part of me wanted to rush over and hug him. Part wanted to turn away. In the end, I stayed still, giving a slight nod. Nathan approached, stopping at the counter, where he used to stand beside me as a boy, grinning while helping pour coffee for customers. Now, his eyes were filled with guilt. "Mom, I'm sorry," Nathan said, his voice trembling. "I let things go too far. I know I should have stood up, should have protected you, but I stayed silent. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, and I chose the worst way." I looked straight at him, my eyes cold, but hiding a deep pain. "You stayed silent when I was humiliated," I replied, my voice low and slow. "You sat there, listening to your wife call me senile, hearing her declare this cafe would be yours when I died, and you didn't say a word. Nathan, that wasn't carelessness. That was your choice." Nathan flinched, as if stabbed in the heart. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. "I know," he choked out. "I betrayed you. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would smooth over, but I didn't realize my silence hurt you more than any insult. I regret it, Mom. If only I could go back." I turned away, looking out the window where the afternoon sun cast light across the table. I remembered the little boy who hugged me at 5 years old, saying, "Don't be scared, Mom. I'll protect you." Yet the grown man before me had left me to face humiliation alone. "Nathan," I said softly, "some wounds never heal. no matter how many apologies. I don't need you to go back and fix the past. I just need you to be honest with yourself. You chose your wife, chose silence over me, and the price of that choice, we both have to bear. Tears streamed down Nathan's face. He sank into a chair, repeating, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I stayed silent. My heart ached, but my eyes were dry. I had cried too much already. His belated apology couldn't erase those lonely nights, couldn't erase the feeling of being invisible to my own son. Harper had told me, "Don't wait for others' regret to save yourself. Stand up on your own." And he was right. I had started to stand, and I couldn't go back to being the weak woman who forgave unconditionally. I placed my hand on the table, cutting Nathan off. "You can apologize, and I'll listen, but the distance between us won't vanish overnight. You let it grow with every day you stayed silent, and now you'll need a lifetime to prove you truly want to change." Nathan looked up, eyes red, nodding weakly. "I'll do it. I'll do anything to earn your trust again, even if it takes my whole life." Cassandra's face turned ashen. She turned to Nathan, her voice trembling. You have to believe me. I was just trying to take care of us." Nathan looked like he'd been doused in cold water, his eyes wide with horror. He stammered, You told me it was all legal. You said Mom agreed." Cassandra's voice broke, shrill and desperate. "You shut up too. You never did anything. I carried everything. You avoided it, left it all to me. So don't look at me like I'm the only betrayer." Nathan clutched his head, shaking it violently. No, I didn't know what to do, but I never wanted this." I looked at my son, the boy who once promised to protect me, now sitting there, shocked and despairing. My heart ached, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't be weak. I'd let them push me too far for too long. Mr. Hanley stood, slamming the folder shut, his voice booming. "I won't tolerate this deception. You used my name, someone else's property. Cassandra, you'll face legal consequences. I'm contacting my lawyer today." The Starbrew representatives stood, their tone icy. "We're withdrawing from all discussions immediately. We'll file an internal report on this. Our company doesn't deal in fraud." Cassandra gaped, trying to salvage. "Wait, you don't understand. But no one listened anymore. They gathered their papers and left. Only we remained. Me, Harper, Cassandra, Nathan, and a crushing silence. I stood, looking straight at Cassandra, my voice cold but controlled. "You once said I was old, no longer sharp, but today, Cassandra, who's the one not thinking clearly? Who let ambition blind their conscience?" Cassandra trembled, her eyes flashing with hatred, but before her stood no weak old woman. I had the truth, and I would use it to take everything back. Nathan sat, head in hands, whispering, "God, what have we done?" I didn't answer. I knew this was just the beginning. Cassandra had taken a fatal blow, but the fight would go on. This time, I was no longer the passive one. I had evidence. I had the truth. The game had turned. The meeting room now held only the four of us. No more rustling papers. No more cautious glances from Starbrew or Mr. Hanley. Just a thick, suffocating silence like an invisible wall. Cassandra sat there, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and Harper like a cornered animal. Nathan slouched, his trembling hands and bowed back bearing the weight of a mountain. I was about to stand and leave when Cassandra shot up, her voice shrill, trembling but still attacking. "This is all Nathan's fault." He agreed. I was just following his lead. Her accusation landed like a bomb. I whipped around to look at my son. Nathan lifted his head, eyes wide with horror, mouth agape, unable to speak. "Cassandra, what are you saying? I never told you to forge the contract. I never agreed to sell the cafe." Nathan stammered, his voice thick with pain. Cassandra gave a bitter, distorted laugh. "You stayed silent, always silent. Isn't that agreement? You let me handle everything. You avoided it, left it all to me. So don't act like I'm the only betrayer." Nathan clutched his head, shaking it frantically. "No, Cassandra, you've gone too far. The cafe isn't yours, and you never truly loved me. Mom was right. I stayed silent too long, but no more." Cassandra laughed, a harsh, grating sound, then collapsed into her chair. Her body shook, her eyes empty. In that moment, I no longer saw an arrogant, confident woman, but someone consumed by her own ambition. The room was deathly quiet. Only Cassandra's ragged breathing, Nathan's choked sobs, and the resolute silence in my heart remained. I knew Cassandra had destroyed herself. Without my accusations, without Starbrew's rejection, her own words had admitted everything. And with what she'd said, she'd never regain anyone's trust. The sound hit like a bolt of lightning, shattering the room's silence. Nathan flinched, staring at his wife, his face ashen, lips trembling, unable to speak. Mr. Hanley sighed, closed the folder, and looked directly at Cassandra. I cannot continue this meeting. What you've done is not just dishonest. It may be illegal. I'll have to review everything. The Starbrew representatives stood, gathering their documents, and said coldly, "We don't do business with people relying on forged documents. This isn't how Starbrew operates." Cassandra's mouth fell open, speechless. Nathan finally stood, but only to look at me, his eyes filled with conflict and pain. I held my gaze steady. I'd spent too many years hiding my weakness. But today, for the first time, I knew I'd reclaimed the most important thing, my voice. The room was heavy, but my heart blazed. The battle wasn't over, but this was my first counterstrike, and Cassandra had just taken a fatal blow. The air in the meeting room was thick, heavy enough to slice into pieces, as Cassandra's arrogant screams, "I don't need your judgment. You're old. Let me handle the business," still echoed. Harper stood calmly. He pulled a neat stack of documents from his worn leather briefcase, placing it on the table with a resolute thud. "Please, everyone, take a close look," Harper said, his voice low but sharp. "This is the original lease agreement between Miss Lucinda Richter and Mr. Hanley, legally notarized years ago. This is the certified copy from the court. And this," he placed Cassandra's contract beside it, "is what Miss Cassandra brought. You can see the difference, the handwriting, the signature, and most importantly, the notary seal. One is real, the other is a blatant forgery." All eyes turned to the two sets of papers. The contrast was undeniable. My signature on the original was round, familiar, backed by a notary seal. Cassandra's version had a distorted, lifeless signature with no legal verification. Mr. Hanley frowned, adjusting his glasses, examining the documents repeatedly. His face reddened with anger. "Cassandra," he said sternly, "I never signed any addendum or additional document with you. I never agreed to private dealings without Miss Richter present. What did you show me at our last meeting?" Cassandra paled briefly but forced an awkward smile. "You must be mistaken, Mr. Hanley. That addendum, Lucinda signed it. I was just delivering it on her behalf." Mr. Hanley slammed the table, startling everyone. "No, I know exactly what I signed and with whom. I never signed anything with you. If you dared to use my name as a tool in this dirty scheme, I'll sue you for forgery." The room shook. Cassandra faltered, her face white. Nathan, beside her, kept his head down, his hands visibly trembling. Harper wasn't done. He calmly flipped to another set of documents. "Furthermore, we have bank statements provided by the branch manager, Mr. Klein. These detail the cafe's profits over the past year. You'll see that instead of going to Miss Richter's account as they always did, a significant portion was siphoned off to a personal account under Cassandra Richter's name. This was systematic and ongoing. This is theft, plain and simple." Harper handed the papers over. The Starbrew representatives leaned in, their eyes growing colder. One whispered, "If this gets out, it'll be a scandal for our brand." The other nodded, quietly tucking away their notepad. I sat still, my hands on the table, but inside a storm was breaking loose. For months, I'd suspected, I'd hurt, but now the truth was laid bare. Undeniable. Cassandra could no longer hide behind sweet words or claims of the common good. Harper signaled me. I nodded slightly, opened my purse, and pulled out the small USB drive. He plugged it into the projector. The room fell silent, save for Cassandra's voice, chillingly clear. "When she's away, I'll sell the cafe to Starbrew. As long as I have the forged contract with her signature, it'll go smoothly. Nathan doesn't need to know too much. I'll handle it." The words cut like a blade. There was no room for excuses. Cassandra stood quickly, her voice clear as if the meeting were her personal stage. "Thank you all for being here. Today I'd like to discuss transferring the cafe's lease to Starbrew Coffee. This is a significant step forward, benefiting all parties. And here, she placed a thick folder on the table, flipping to the last page. Is the contract with Lucinda Richter's signature, the current owner? She has agreed. My heart clenched as Cassandra revealed the paper, pointing to the forged signature that looked identical to mine. Mr. Hanley leaned forward, nodding slightly, while one of the Starbrew representatives spoke. So everything has been finalized? Before Cassandra could respond, Harper and I stepped fully into the room. The chair creaked as I pulled it out to sit across from her. The room fell into a heavy silence. Cassandra froze for half a second before regaining her confident air, her lips curling into a mocking smile. Oh, you're here too. Good. At least you'll hear again the decision you signed, but don't remember. I placed my briefcase on the table, my voice slow but clear. I'm here to make one thing clear. I never signed any contract to sell the cafe's lease. What you're presenting is nothing but forged documents. Cassandra let out a shrill laugh that echoed in the room. Do you really think you're still sharp enough to remember everything? You signed it, you just don't recall. Nathan and I have seen your confusion for a long time. That's why I had to step in to protect the family's interests. I could feel the wavering glances from Mr. Hanley and the two Starbrew representatives. Without evidence, they might believe Cassandra. She spoke fluently, confidently, and had prepared well. But I knew this was the moment to lay everything bare. Harper stood, placing a thick stack of documents on the table, his voice warm yet sharp. Mr. Hanley, representatives of Starbrew, this is the original lease agreement, legally notarized at the courthouse. This is also the certified copy from the legal records I personally handled for Miss Richter years ago. As you can see, it's entirely different from what Cassandra just presented. And this, he handed over another stack, is the bank statement, proving that for months, profits from the cafe have been illegally diverted to Cassandra Richter's personal account. The room buzzed with murmurs. Mr. Hanley frowned, staring at Cassandra. Miss Richter, is this true? Cassandra clenched her fists, but forced a smile. Don't listen to these baseless accusations. She's delusional. She's old. I stood, looking straight at Cassandra, my voice firmer than ever. I don't need you to judge my memory or my age. I never signed. And now, I have a witness who will prove the truth. At that moment, the door swung open. Mr. Klein, the bank manager, entered at Harper's prior invitation. He nodded to everyone and spoke clearly. I've overseen Miss Lucinda Richter's account for years. I can confirm that Miss Richter is fully competent in all her transactions. I also confirm that recently, funds from the cafe have been illegally transferred to an account under Cassandra Richter's name, without the primary account holder's consent. Silence engulfed the room. Cassandra's face paled briefly, but then she shot up, slamming her hand on the table, her voice rising to a near scream. I don't need your judgment. You're old, Lucinda. Let me handle the business. I'm the one who knows what's best for this cafe, not a stubborn old woman living in the past. Her voice echoed, full of rage, but her loss of composure revealed her true nature. The Starbrew representatives exchanged looks, their faces filled with doubt. Mr. Hanley frowned, tapping his fingers on the table. Harper calmly retrieved a USB drive from his briefcase and plugged it into the room's projector. Cassandra's voice came through the speakers, low but clear. When she's away, I'll sell the cafe to Starbrew. As long as I have the forged contract with her signature, it'll go smoothly. Nathan doesn't need to know too much. I'll handle it. I asked, my voice trembling. What can I do? Harper looked me straight in the eye. We have to stop this at the root. First, I'll contact Mr. Hanley's law office to confirm if he's attending this meeting. You, Lucinda, need to gather all original documents, the notarized lease, every record with your real signature. If necessary, we'll force Starbrew to face the truth. They're dealing with forged papers. On the way home, my heart raced. I remembered every day Robert and I scraped by to buy that old house and turn it into the cafe. It wasn't just property, it was proof of a lifetime of labor. Now Cassandra planned to turn it into a commodity, to brand it with her name and Starbrew's, while I was erased. Days later, the rumors about the meeting spread beyond Emily, Lucas, a longtime server, whispered to me at the grocery store. Miss Lucinda, I didn't dare say this at the cafe, but I overheard Cassandra telling Nathan the Starbrew meeting is next week. She bragged about showing your signature to Mr. Hanley to gain his trust. I asked, did you see it yourself? Lucas nodded, looking uneasy. Yes, ma'am. I passed by the office when the door was ajar. Cassandra showed Mr. Hanley a stack of papers with a signature at the end. I didn't look long, but it looked just like yours. My heart sank. I'd prepared for the worst, but hearing it confirmed by an employee still left me reeling. So Cassandra had truly used the forged contract to convince both the landlord and a major corporation. That night, I sat with Harper again. He spread the documents on the table, pointing out each one. Here's your real signature. Here's the notarization. Here's the court record. And here are the statements showing the cafe has been under your name for years. We have weapons, but we need more. An insider witness. I thought back to the anonymous email about the recording. Maybe that person could help me turn the tide. I opened my inbox and sent another message. I know about the plan to sell the cafe. If you truly have a recording, please send it to me. This isn't just about me. It's about justice. As I hit send, my hands didn't shake like before. From a mother heartbroken by betrayal, I was becoming an old warrior, gathering weapons to strike back. Cassandra thought she could sell the cafe with a fake signature, but she'd underestimated me. In the quiet night, I looked around the cafe, the tables, the lamps. This wasn't just a place that sold coffee. It was where I'd poured my heart, and I swore I wouldn't let anyone, not even my daughter-in-law, turn it into a commodity for her ambition. The real battle was about to begin. The day of the meeting arrived, and the Bend sky was gray, heavy clouds signaling an approaching storm. I sat in the car with Harper, my heart pounding so hard, it felt like it might burst from my chest. Harper glanced at me, his voice calm as always. Lucinda, remember, you're not alone. Today, we have the truth, the evidence, and a witness. Cassandra only has lies. Don't let fear silence your voice. I nodded, clutching the briefcase with the original contract, bank statements, and the small USB drive sent by the anonymous employee 2 days ago, a recording of Cassandra clearly discussing selling the cafe behind Lucinda's back. This would be my ace. The meeting was held in a sleek office near downtown. As Harper and I walked in, the air was thick with tension. At the long table sat Mr. Hanley, the landlord, his aged but stern face unreadable, flanked by 2 Starbrew coffee representatives in crisp suits. Across from them was Cassandra, dressed impeccably, her hair pinned up, her smile a mix of triumph and defiance. Nathan sat beside her, visibly tense but silent, glancing at me briefly before looking away. Her words sent waves of anger through me. Each sentence seemed designed to erase my existence, to reduce me to a senile old woman on the sidelines. But instead of snapping back, I kept my voice steady. If you truly believe I'm old and incapable, do what you want, Cassandra. But remember, I'll never forget the words you've said today. She smiled. A chilling smile. Good. I hope you do remember, because the court will confirm it. I saw Nathan close his eyes, his hands clenched on his lap. I wondered if he felt any shame, listening to his wife humiliate his mother. But if he did, he still said nothing. The meeting dragged on for nearly an hour. Cassandra repeated her points. I was old, no longer sharp, and only she had the skills to take over. I sat quietly, occasionally nodding, as if agreeing, but inside, I was memorizing every word, every tone, knowing the recorder in my pocket would capture it all. When Cassandra stood, ending the conversation with, "You have 1 week to think it over. If you don't cooperate, I'll file the paperwork." I gave a faint smile. "Thank you for giving me time," I said, my voice cold. "A week is more than enough." Nathan glanced up briefly, as if wanting to say something, but let Cassandra pull him out of my house. The door closed, leaving me in silence. I exhaled, pulling the recorder from my pocket. The red light still blinked, signaling everything had been captured. I played back the start, and Cassandra's voice came through clearly. "You're old, signing things carelessly. I have to take over for safety." I closed my eyes, feeling both pain and determination. That night, I sent the recording to Harper with a short note. I have what we need. As I hit send, I knew I'd entered a new phase. Cassandra thought I was a weak old woman, easily cornered, but she forgot one thing. I'd spent my life protecting what I loved, and this time, I wasn't just defending. I was striking back. After that cold family meeting, I thought Cassandra would lie low to prepare her legal filings as she'd threatened. But no, her ambition was too great to wait. Just a few days later, I got news I could hardly believe. Cassandra was secretly negotiating with a major coffee chain, Starbrew Coffee, a name familiar with hundreds of stores across the West. I didn't hear this from the news or vague rumors, but from Emily, a former part-time employee who'd worked at the cafe for over a year before leaving to focus on her studies. That evening she called me, her voice urgent, almost trembling. "Miss Lucinda, I didn't know if I should tell you, but today I overheard Cassandra on the phone in the cafe. She mentioned a meeting with Starbrew Coffee, saying she'd sell the cafe's lease, and I heard her brag about having a contract with your signature as proof." I froze. My hand holding the phone went cold. Cassandra's words from the family meeting were still fresh in my mind, and now they were turning into real action. I bit my lip to stay calm. Emily continued, "I don't know the details, but I heard her mention the landlord, Mr. Hanley. I think she's meeting him and Starbrew to discuss. Miss Lucinda, I had to tell you, I'm afraid they're trying to cut you out completely." I thanked Emily, my voice catching. After hanging up, I sank into a chair, feeling as if the air had been sucked out of the room. I'd known Cassandra was ambitious, but I hadn't imagined she'd be bold enough to sell the cafe, my heart and soul behind my back, using a forged contract. The next morning, I met with Harper. I laid out everything Emily had told me. His face darkened, his brow furrowed. "Lucinda, if this is true, it's no longer just about forged documents. This is a large-scale scheme to steal your property. Starbrew has a strong legal team. If they believe Cassandra's contract, you could lose control before you have a chance to fight back." Leaving Harper's office, I felt a surge of energy. Before, I'd felt like a lost old woman caught in my daughter-in-law's scheme. Now, I had a real ally. That afternoon, I went to the bank. Mr. Klein greeted me with a warm smile, but when I asked for the statements, he paused, then grew serious. "Lucinda, is something wrong?" I couldn't hold back anymore. I told him about the forged contract and my suspicion that the cafe's money was being diverted. Klein listened silently, then quickly pulled up the records, showing me the computer screen. And there it was, clear as day. Funds that should have gone to my account were being steadily siphoned off to another account in Cassandra Richter's name. I bit my lip so hard I thought it might bleed. For over 6 months, Cassandra had been quietly skimming profits, and I, the founder, the owner, the mother of her husband, had been completely unaware. Klein sighed. "Lucinda, I'll print out all these statements. This is critical evidence. But be very careful. It's clear they've been planning this." I held the thick stack of papers, feeling both their weight like a stone and their power like a newly forged sword. I knew I had my first piece of evidence. That evening, I sat in the cafe's office, the desk covered with documents, altered invoices, bank statements, my handwritten notes. I reopened the anonymous email warning. "Be careful. Cassandra is planning to sell the cafe." "I have a recording," I replied briefly. "Please send me the recording. I need it to protect myself." As I hit send, I noticed my hands no longer trembled. The ache of betrayal still lingered, but it was turning into a cold, resolute strength. Cassandra thought I'd back down, that I'd give in. She was wrong. I had begun collecting pieces of the truth, and each one would become a weapon. This battle was just beginning, and I was ready. I thought that with the bank statements in hand and Harper's support, Cassandra would be more cautious, at least temporarily quiet. But I was too naive. Just a few days later, Cassandra called me and Nathan, insisting we need to sit down and talk things out. I knew this wasn't an ordinary family meeting. Her voice over the phone was cold as steel, and from Nathan's silence beside her, I sensed he'd been fully pulled to her side. We met in my living room, the place once filled with Nathan's childhood laughter. But now, the air was thick, suffocating. Cassandra sat in the center, back straight, hands on her knees like a businesswoman, about to pitch a major deal. Nathan sat beside her, his eyes avoiding mine. I sat across from them, silent, with a small recorder Harper had given me hidden in my coat pocket. Cassandra began, her voice clear and deliberate. I think it's time to be frank. The cafe is failing because of your stubbornness. You're old, Lucinda, signing things carelessly, without understanding. That's dangerous. For you and for us. I have to take over for everyone's safety. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stay calm. The recorder in my pocket felt like it was burning. Every word she spoke would be evidence against her. Cassandra, I replied, my voice low and slow. Are you saying I'm no longer competent? She nodded without hesitation. Yes, if you keep resisting, Nathan and I will have to file for guardianship. The law allows it. Once the court declares you unfit to manage your finances, we'll take full control. You won't have to worry anymore. Just rest and enjoy your old age. It's the best option for you. Nathan shifted slightly, as if about to speak, but then fell silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. That silence hurt more than any words. My son, my pride, sat there letting his wife declare me incompetent without a single objection. Cassandra continued, her voice persuasive, as if addressing a room of investors. You should think of Nathan too. He has a career, a reputation. You should think of Nathan too. He has a career, a reputation. He can't keep cleaning up the mess from your cafe. I have the ability to expand, to turn this into a chain, but only if you let go. If you keep clinging, you'll drag us all backward, and we'll have to take legal action. I read it over and over, my heart racing. The words danced before my eyes. Sell the cafe? Cassandra didn't just want to manage it or put her name on the sign. She wanted to erase me completely, using my life's work as a stepping stone for her ambition. I knew she was ambitious, but I hadn't imagined her audacity went this far. I clenched my fists, feeling the cold metal of the old wedding ring I still wore. I thought of Robert, of the promise I made to myself, and a thought pierced my mind. If I stayed silent, I'd lose everything, not just the cafe, the house, but my very dignity. In that moment, the pain no longer paralyzed me. It became fuel, igniting my heart, forcing me to stand. Cassandra thought I was old and weak, incapable of fighting back, but I knew I was still sharp, still strong. And this time, I wouldn't just sit and be erased. I'd fight, not just for the cafe, but for myself, for everything I'd ever been. Outside, the bend wind whistled through the window, cold but sobering. I whispered, as if to Robert, "Honey, I won't let them take everything. I promise." I closed the laptop, my eyes sweeping the cafe, the tables, the walls, the familiar yellow light. Every detail held a piece of my heart, and I knew I'd crossed a line. I was no longer just a mother, a widowed woman, living quietly. I'd become a woman pushed to the edge, ready to do whatever it took to reclaim her life. I couldn't sleep that night. Cassandra's words, along with that anonymous email, kept replaying in my head like a haunting melody. I realized it was time. I could no longer bear this alone. I needed someone who knew the law, someone who could help me turn my anger into action, and only one name came to mind. Mr. Harper, the lawyer who had helped Robert and me finalize the purchase of this house nearly 30 years ago. He was principled, straightforward, and one of the few people in Bend I truly trusted. The next morning, I called to make an appointment with him. Harper's office was on an old street, where red brick buildings had witnessed the town's many ups and downs. When I walked in, he stood to greet me, his kind but sharp eyes looking at me with a hint of concern. "Lucinda, it's been a while. You look tired. What's going on?" I took a deep breath and told him everything, from the delayed invoices to Cassandra practicing my signature, to the forged contract I found in the cafe's office. When I mentioned her threat to file paperwork to prove I'm no longer competent, my voice choked, but Harper gestured for me to continue. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his hands clasped, his gaze focused, as if piecing together a puzzle. "Lucinda," he said finally, his voice firm, "what you've described is fraud and forgery. This isn't just a family dispute, it's a criminal act. Cassandra has crossed a dangerous line, but to win this fight, we need evidence, lots of it." I nodded, feeling both terrified and relieved. At least I knew I wasn't crazy or imagining things. I asked, "Where do I start?" Harper leaned toward me. "First, we need to prove the cafe's finances are being mishandled. If profits are being diverted to Cassandra's account, that's the key. Do you have any connections at the bank?" I immediately thought of Mr. Klein, the branch manager where I'd always deposited money. He'd known me for years, witnessing every transfer to Nathan and Cassandra in the past. I nodded. "Yes, I'll go see him." Harper gave a slight smile. "Good. Request statements for all the cafe's transactions over the past 2 years. I'll review and cross-check them. Meanwhile, keep any evidence you have, emails, texts, recordings. Don't overlook any detail, because that's often where the guilty slip up." I suddenly understood I'd been completely abandoned. The son I'd raised with all my love and sweat had chosen silence as his mother was insulted. The daughter-in-law I'd welcomed now stood brazenly before me, claiming my life's work. "I poured my entire life into this cafe," I said, my voice low and heavy. "Every brick, every penny came from my sweat. And you think a forged paper can take it from me?" "It's not just a paper," Cassandra retorted, her tone bitter. "This is a new era, Lucinda. Clinging to your outdated ways will only leave you behind. Nathan and I deserve to take charge. You just need to rest, live out the rest of your life." Those words were the final stab. I sat there, stunned, feeling the world around me collapse. But deep inside, a smoldering fire began to ignite. I knew I couldn't let it end like this. If I stayed silent, I'd lose everything: the cafe, the house, and myself. That night, after they left, I sat alone in the dark room. The lamp cast light on the forged contract. My signature scrawled mockingly. Tears fell, not just from sadness, but from the rage rising within me. Cassandra thought I was old, weak, unable to fight back. Nathan thought silence was the safest choice. They were wrong. I'd never let anyone dictate my life, and this time was no different. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath. In the mirror, my eyes reflected a resolve that surprised even me. Cassandra thought she could paint me as a senile old woman. I'd show her how dangerous a 62-year-old woman could be when pushed to the wall. I sat alone in the cafe as darkness fell. The wooden chairs were neatly stacked, the soft yellow lights long turned off, leaving only the dim glow of the old desk lamp on the counter. I don't know how long I sat there. Time seemed to stop since Cassandra's threat. "If you don't cooperate, I'll file paperwork to prove you're no longer mentally competent. Nathan and I will take over." Those words echoed in my mind, crushing my chest until I could barely breathe. My daughter-in-law brazenly declared she'd steal my life's work. My son, the only son I loved, cherished, and trusted, bowed his head in silence, as if the betrayal had nothing to do with him. Tonight, in the dark cafe, I felt older and lonelier than ever. I closed my eyes, letting memories flood in like a raging torrent. I thought of my husband, Robert, the gentle man who once held my hand and said, "One day open your own cafe. I want to see you happy amid the smell of coffee and laughter." But Robert left too soon, leaving me with our 5-year-old son. I swore to myself I'd raise Nathan to be a good man, and I did everything to keep that vow. I remembered the grueling years teaching by day, typing for hire at night to make extra money. Some days I was so exhausted, I'd fall asleep at the table, my hands still marked by the keys. But seeing Nathan sleep peacefully, his innocent face pressed against the pillow, gave me strength. I remembered the morning he babbled, "Mom, I'll protect you when I grow up." Those words once pulled me from despair. Nathan grew up, his eyes sparkling as he helped wipe tables in the newly opened cafe. Some days, he'd stand behind the counter, mimicking my coffee-making moves. I believed one day he'd help me preserve this place, like preserving a piece of our family's soul. But now, that same son sat silently at dinner, letting his wife belittle and threaten his mother. Head down, silent, as if all my sacrifices were nothing. The pain was too great. I couldn't even cry anymore. I sat there, my gaunt hands gripping the chair, staring into the darkness. My heart bled, but in the prolonged silence, something shifted. From deep within my chest, a small flame sparked, faint but clear. I couldn't let myself collapse, like a helpless victim. If Robert were alive, He'd never let me sit here while someone stole our legacy. If I gave up, who would preserve the memories, protect my life's work? Just then, the email chime rang from the laptop on the desk. Reluctantly, I opened it, not expecting an anonymous message, just a few lines that left me stunned. Be careful. Cassandra is planning to sell the cafe. I have a recording. From that day, I paid closer attention. Invoices listed Cassandra as the recipient, though I'd never authorized it. Calls from suppliers, once directed to me, now went straight to her number. Some staff even slipped and called her. The boss, quickly apologizing when they saw my look. I forced a smile, but inside it felt like a knife twisting. One evening at dinner together at home, Cassandra casually remarked, half joking, half serious, "You'll have to let me take full control eventually, so stop resisting." The room went cold. I looked at Nathan, expecting a reaction, but he just kept eating, head down, as if he hadn't heard. That silence hurt more than Cassandra's challenge. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that reacting too harshly would widen the gap with my son. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Cassandra's smug smile in the office, the delayed transfers, her cold, "You'll have to let me take full control," swirled in my mind. I started wondering, when did the boy who promised to protect me turn his back, letting his wife treat me like an outsider? I realized I was walking a dangerous path. Cassandra didn't just want to manage the cafe. She wanted to take it entirely, and Nathan, my son, whom I'd raised with my whole life, was letting it happen. I knew if I stayed silent, I'd lose not just the cafe, but the house, everything I'd built over decades. And the most painful part, I might lose the son I'd once seen as my greatest pride. I couldn't take it anymore. The red flags, the dismissive words, the scornful looks had piled up like thick dust covering a precious object. One day, I knew I had to brush it off, even if it meant shattering the room, even if it broke what was left of this family. That day, after checking the altered invoices once more, I decided I wouldn't stay silent. I called Nathan and Cassandra to the house for a frank talk. The dining table, once a place for warm family meals, became a battlefield. "Cassandra," I began, my voice trembling but clear, "why is my name no longer on the invoices? Why is there a new land lease contract with a signature I never made?" Nathan froze, his chopsticks clattering to the table, but Cassandra wasn't fazed. She set her chopsticks down, slowly wiped her mouth with a napkin, and looked at me with icy eyes. "So you found it," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Yes, I redid the contract, and yes, I signed for you. I wasn't going to hide it forever. I just thought you should thank me for trying to take this place forward instead of letting it die in your hands." My heart pounded like a war drum. "You're admitting you forged my signature?" I nearly shouted, my voice breaking. "Forged?" Cassandra smirked. "I call it a solution. Nathan agrees, you're no longer fit to run a cafe. You're stubborn, you don't listen to advice." So I had to act. I turned to Nathan, waiting, hoping he'd object, defend his mother. But he just looked down, avoiding my gaze, like a child caught in a lie, but too scared to speak. "Nathan," I called, my voice choking, "you agreed to this." His lips moved, but no sound came out. His silence was the cruelest answer. Cassandra leaned toward me, her eyes like daggers piercing my chest. "You need to understand, Lucinda. If you don't cooperate, I'll file paperwork to prove you're no longer mentally competent. Then Nathan and I will take over. It'll all be legal. No one can save you from that." The room seemed to freeze. My hair stood on end. Those words, from the woman I once called my daughter-in-law, weren't just a threat. They were a verdict. I looked at my son, waiting for one last reaction, a protest, a redemption. But Nathan kept his head down, hands clenched, trembling, but not daring to look up. Nathan grew up with that coffee scent. As a child, he'd scamper around the cafe, helping wipe tables, sometimes strumming an old guitar to sing for customers. I was always proud of my son, a kind, bright boy who grew into a respected engineer. On quiet evenings after closing, we'd sit together, Nathan holding my hand, saying, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be your rock one day. You've done everything for me. I'll never let you be alone. Those words were once my strength, carrying me through exhaustion. Then Cassandra came along. At first, I was genuinely happy for Nathan. She was smart, eloquent, always smiling sweetly, and calling me mom with courtesy. I thought, finally, my son found a woman to share his life with. I opened my arms, treating Cassandra like a daughter, even entrusting her with small tasks in the cafe, thinking it would help her feel part of the family. But things changed quickly after the wedding. Cassandra's sweet tone vanished, replaced by critical, sometimes disdainful looks. She started offering more and more suggestions about how I ran the cafe. At first, I thought it was just enthusiasm, but her words grew sharper, even publicly belittling me. "You don't know anything about modern business," Cassandra said, her voice dripping with contempt. "If you hand the cafe over to me, I'll make it thrive. Clinging to your old-fashioned ways will kill this place, sooner or later." I was stunned the first time I heard those words. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a denial of my entire life's work. But for Nathan's sake, I swallowed my anger, stayed silent. I told myself things would settle, that Cassandra was just being impulsive. I didn't want my son caught between his mother and his wife, but Cassandra kept pushing. Words turned to actions. She started interfering with the menu, changing the decor, and gradually, people saw her mark on the cafe, not mine. Nathan grew quieter, more evasive. Whenever I tried to talk, he'd brush me off with vague replies before walking away. Looking back, I see the warning signs were there all along. I just didn't want to believe them, clinging to memories of the boy who promised to protect me. But seeing my forged signature on that contract, and hearing Cassandra brazenly claim ownership, I could no longer deny it. The daughter-in-law I'd welcomed had shed her polite mask, revealing an ambitious woman ready to trample others to get what she wanted. I tried convincing myself Cassandra's words were just impulsive, that every mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship has its clashes. But looking back, the red flags had been there for a long time. I'd just chosen to ignore them. After my husband's death, I'd grown used to shouldering everything, and perhaps that patience made me too lenient with the odd behaviors around me. It started with the cafe's revenue. I had a habit of checking the books weekly to ensure everything was in order. But in recent months, transfers from the cafe's POS system to the account started arriving late, first by a day or two, then by a week. I asked Nathan, and he gave an awkward smile. "Probably just the bank system, Mom. Don't worry. Cassandra's handling that stuff. Let her deal with it." His words made me uneasy, but I didn't want to stir tension. I remembered Nathan as a boy, sitting by me at the counter doing homework, promising to help keep the cafe strong. Yet now, whenever I pressed further, he'd dodge, saying, "Cassandra knows finance better. I'm busy with work, Mom. Just let her handle it." His evasive tone hurt more than anything, like he was building an invisible wall to keep me out of his and his wife's world. One afternoon, while organizing files in the office, I caught Cassandra at my desk. She was holding my familiar stack of papers, and my eyes nearly popped out when I saw her practicing my signature on a scrap of paper. The scrawled lines were clearly an attempt to mimic mine. When she noticed me, she flinched, crumpled the paper, and gave a fake laugh. "Just messing around, don't misunderstand." That cold smile sent chills through me. I said nothing, but alarm bells started ringing in my head. When I returned to Bend after a few days at the workshop, I never expected the first thing I'd hear would be Cassandra's icy voice. As soon as I stepped into the cafe, she was standing at the counter, arms crossed, staring straight at me with a smug smile curling her lips. "You're old, Lucinda. This place will belong to me and Nathan, sooner or later. You'd better get used to it." Her words hit like a gavel's final strike, leaving me frozen at the threshold, the room spinning around me. I looked around. Customers were still sipping their coffee, but some were whispering to each other, even calling the place Cassandra's Café. My heart ached, as if my own name had been erased from the sign hanging outside. I stepped further inside, trying to steady myself, while my eyes searched for any sign that this was a dream. But everything had changed. The menu on the wall was no longer the one I'd designed. Instead, it was a glossy printout with items I'd never approved. Some customers glanced at me with unfamiliar eyes, as if I were just a woman passing through, not the one who'd built this place brick by brick. I rushed to the back office, where I'd always carefully stored every invoice, contract, and ledger. But the room was now empty, as if my past had been scraped clean. On the desk, instead of my familiar stack of documents, was a pristine pile of papers bearing Cassandra's bold logo. My heart pounded as I saw the land lease contract neatly placed on top, with a scrawled signature identical to mine. A forged signature, a blatant betrayal. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just the contract that had been forged, but my place in the family, in my son's life, had been replaced. A chill ran down my spine, but my hands burned, trembling so much I could barely hold the papers. Everything I'd believed I controlled had been stripped away in an instant, and Cassandra's earlier words echoed in my mind, drowning me in humiliation. "You're old, you'd better get used to it." I knew, from that moment, this wasn't just about a cafe, it was a battle to reclaim my honor, the truth, and my entire life. I stood frozen in the office, my hands clutching the forged contract so tightly, my fingers turned white. Cassandra's words reverberated in my head, each one like salt rubbed into a fresh wound. Never had I felt such a deep chasm between me and my son. I sank into the old wooden chair, took a deep breath, and memories began flooding back, like a film reel, rewinding to the past. Years ago, I wasn't the solitary woman I am now. I once had a home, a gentle husband, who supported every dream of mine, no matter how small. But his sudden death left a void nothing could fill. Nathan was just a boy then, his eyes red and wide with panic as he looked at me. In that moment, I swore I'd do everything to give my son a bright future, to ensure he never felt deprived of love or support. I started saving every penny from my teaching job, paying off debts while raising him. Every coin I saved went into an old wooden box under the bed, dreaming of the day I could buy a small house, not just for shelter, but to make my biggest dream come true, opening a cafe. I'd loved the smell of coffee since my student days, staying up all night studying by an oil lamp with a cheap cup of coffee. I always believed a hot cup of coffee could warm people's hearts, bringing them closer together. It took nearly 2 decades to save enough to buy an old house in the heart of Bend. Many called me foolish, saying the place was run down and needed too much work. But to me, it was a rough gem waiting to be polished. I spent every weekend painting walls, replacing roof tiles, choosing every table and chair. When Lucinda's Café finally opened, I cried with joy. It wasn't just a cafe, it was proof of a lifetime of relentless work, the resilience of a widowed woman who refused to give up.